Living my bucolic life, free healthy city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Okay, try and adjust this so you can see my bottom hem. Maybe a little lower. Right there. Okay, so I've got my hooks and eyes on over there, and I need to work on this hem. Okay, I know I don't have my sleeves and everything on yet. That's okay. I want my finished hem of the outer part to be a little bit lower than my lining part. And because I've got so much going on here, and I have this up on my dress form that is as close to my actual size as possible right now, so I can kind of get an idea of how it's going to hang, okay? So what I'm going to do is use my handy dandy hem marker here and go all the way around. If you've never used these before, they're handy dandy. This little flap, the fabric gets stuck in there, and there is a little place where a pin can go through. So I am marking this where I'm going to have my bottom edge of my blue hem, okay? And right now this is at 16.5. So what I'm doing is I'm going to put my blue layer only in here and stick a pin through, and just kind of, I want to get one in the very, very start. Remember, I left this open right here in the very beginning. Hang on, I need to turn here so that I can mark that also. And I'm doing it this way because it's not going to be the same measurement all the way around. So like here, it only looks like maybe 1.25 inches. Here it looks more like 1.5 inches, because it depends on how things are laying. And there are so many darts and so many strange curves that the fabric can get puckered up a little bit differently in different places, so it might not be totally even. But doing the hem last like this on the actual way it's going to hang, you can correct all of that at one time. So that's what I'm doing. First, I'm going to go all the way around, just sticking my little straight pins through so I have a line that I can follow, like that. All right, so at this point, I have pins outlining the place where I want the very bottom of my hem to be. So when the final hem is there, I want it to be folded like that, okay? I'm not even dealing with the lining at this point, just this point, this one. And I'm going to be hemming this a little differently than normal. I am going to be, I just pulled out one of my pins. It's okay, I can fix that. I'm going to be using horsehair, and it's not real horsehair. It's a nylon horsehair braid. This is a 1-inch braid. They come in all kinds of widths. This was another Waywalk order at one point. Okay, if I had a 2-inch, I would use a 2-inch today, but I do not have any 2-inch right now. I just have 1-inch, so that's what I'm going to use. And what it does is it gives the hem body. So I played with a couple samples to figure out how I want to do this thing. And this is a very typical way of doing it, okay? But doing it this way, which is basically sewing it on 1/4 inch away from where you want your hem to be, and then you can fold it up like that. And you have this in here that then you can stitch up there. And what that does is it gives a really nice body to your hem, okay? And this flexes, so it's great for circular hems. But I don't really want the braid to be visible, okay? And so even though this is a very valid way to do it, I don't want that visible, so I'm not going to do it that way. And so what I came up with is a way to do it this way. So in this method, where I want my final edge to be, I edge stitch my braid slightly stretched, because this, you know, stretches and compresses like that. Slightly stretched at that point. And then when I fold it, because this is a curve, because I stitched it on a little bit stretched, it can expand then. And so then I can get that curve because it can expand, all right? But I don't want, that leaves the edge of my braid and the edge of my fabric loose. And so I just ran the edge of it through my serger, and I am going to be, when all is done, I'm going to be attaching the white lining up here, so this ultimately will not be visible. So I think that that is going to be okay. So I believe this is the method I'm going to use. So with that, what I need to do is get my coat all straightened out here. And I am actually going to sharpen my chalk and draw a chalk line along the edge here so I can pull out all of these hems. So let me go ahead and get that first. Okay, so I am just going to take it one little at a time. So I just pulled off the first pin and made a little mark. And then by eye, I'm just going to follow one at a time, pin to pin. Got some bulkiness under there, but that's okay, to get that nice edge all the way around. So give me about 5 minutes to finish this up. This, and I will be right back. All right, so I have it all marked, and I went over to my ironing board, and at all the seam allowances that are open, I put stitch witchery to hold those down so they're nice and flat. At the beginning where I have that piece of sew-in interfacing, I just put a little strip of stitch witchery right there to hold that still. You know, we want things to behave themselves. At the very back vent opening, I put a double pin mark at the beginning point and the ending point of the fold for this vent that goes like that, because I do not want my horsehair braid to be in this fold, okay? I want a horsehair up to this point and then starting here and over. I want this to be super loose and floppy so it can collapse in on itself, okay? But the seam here does not get pressed open. It stays kind of pinched that way. So I went ahead and put just a little bit of stitch witchery in there, holding those two seam allowances together, you know, to kind of encourage it to stay that way. So what I need to do, because of the method that I'm going to be using, is I need to trim from the edge. Let's see if I can find my ruler here. There she is. All right, I have it marked where I want the edge of my hem to be. I need to trim off to 1 inch below it, because 1 inch is the width of my horsehair braid, okay? I need to trim it so that the edge of my fabric is at that 1 inch mark. I have my scissors, and as I mark it, I'm just going to come along and trim it down like this, and just keep going all the way around that bottom edge so that it's just like this the whole way. All right, so I have my edge all cut off, you know, at 1 inch below the finished. So what I'm going to do, this is just my little sample that I can show you, is sew on my horsehair like this. All right, and this side is going to stay free for just a moment, but I'm just going to kind of lay it at its full width so that the edge lines up here and this is here. But then as I sew it, because I have this edge cut, I can kind of keep it uniform. So if I stretch it then, and I have about 1/8 of an inch showing all the way around, I'll know that it's stretching in a uniform way all the way around the skirt. So let me go over to my machine and I'll show you what I mean. All right, so I want to start this about a seam allowance in so that when this is folded under, it's going to want to lay flat. So a good way to do that is kind of folding it from where I have my opening here all the way down and kind of butting that horsehair braid up as far as it can go, and that feels about right. So I'm going to open it back up and get it started before it has a chance to move. Just put a couple stitches in, back them up. Okay. So now that I have that anchored, like I said, I'm going to lay it so this braid here is kind of up against the edge. And then just before I start stitching, kind of keeping my finger over here, I'll stretch it just a hair. And that should give me a pretty accurate hem. You'll be able to see better, I think, on the blue part here. Okay, so I'm going to lay my braid along the edge like this. Okay, I'm going to keep my little finger right here so I know it's on the edge. Stretch that out just a hair. Put my needle down and start it again. Lay this along the edge. Put my finger at that point where it is, stretch it out about, so there's about 1/8 of an inch gap, but it's still along my finger. And so that's just my own personal little guide, cheat sheet. You know, you can do however works for you. Just kind of figure things out as you go. Like that. And it doesn't have to be exact. You just want to make sure you work in enough ease so that when you turn it the opposite way, there's enough extra in there that it can flex back out. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the same way up to that vent point. Okay, so I decided that I do want to serge the edge of that hem in the same blue thread just to make sure that in case the lining doesn't attach exactly as I'm thinking right now, that it'll still be pretty and not show. So I'm going to show you what I do, because buying a whole bunch of cones of serger thread can be expensive, and if you're only doing a small thing, you know, sometimes you just don't need to. So what I do is I took the bobbin from here, and that's going to be my needle thread on my serger. I'm going to use my big old spool here for one of my loopers, and I'm going to run another bobbin, a brand new full bobbin of thread for the other looper, and hope that that little bobbin is enough to go all the way across the hem. I think it will be, but we'll see. So let me get ahead, get this filled up, change out the threads on my serger, and we will do the edge. Okay, so now as I'm serging this side, because the outside is going to become the inside, and the inside is going to need to be kind of compressed because it is a slight curved hemline. What I'm doing is as I'm serging, I'm kind of making sure that I try to work in some of that extra. So basically I am easing in fullness over here. All right, so instead of curving it out like that, I'm trying to kind of curve it this way. All right, that's exaggerated, but you get the idea. So when I'm serging, I'm kind of working any little extra in there. And I'm trying not to cut off my braid, but just go along the edge of it. Okay, so this is where my little pleat is going to start. So after that, I can just go through. Now this, I actually don't want it to be attached to one side or the other, so I'm going to kind of go off track and then come back around it. Lift this up, flip it back the other way, and then come back. Because I want it to be able to stay, you know, its own little being sticking out there. So again, come out here. lift up my presser foot, flip that seam allowance underneath, put it back down. All right, how am I doing on thread? Doing okay on thread. So let me go ahead and I'm going to finish this the rest of the way, but it's the same thing where I'm kind of going to try to, instead of curving it this way, trying to kind of curve it that way, and it's going to try to work in some of this fullness down here as I go. Okay, so now over here at my ironing board, here it is sewed on. So I'm just going to kind of fold it up and press it down. You know, I'm kind of like compressing up here as I go. And then I can hit it lightly with my steam iron. And as I press down, I'm actually rubbing that chalk line off at the same time. So now I have this nice body-filled hem, okay? So I'm just going to put little clips on it, you know, every so often. And I will be catch stitching this down the whole way so that it doesn't really show from the outside. But again, just folding it up, making sure it's nicely at the edge here, hitting it with my steam iron. I'm not pushing down, I'm just lightly going over it. I am touching it, but I'm not pressing on it, you know. It's more for the moisture and a little bit of something in the steam, okay? Just kind of working it like this all the way down. When I get to the pleat, I will be trying to repress that pleat to give it a nice edge and continuing to clip all the way. So here's the end. This is my little pleaty opening, and I am going to make a clip about 1 inch deep on each side. And there may be a better way to do this, but this is just how I am choosing to do it right now, because I have this fold here and I want to be able to refold it, press this fold, but keep this whole seam open here. And that way when I come back and press it this way, and I'm catch stitching it, I'll be able to sew this whole seam up here, okay? And this will be open down there, but I will be very carefully by hand catching it to make sure that it's going to stay good. And this does not fray, you know? It's a very, very sturdy fabric, so I feel fairly comfortable doing this. If yours frays, you may want to put some of a sealer on here if you're doing it the same way, you know, like my clear nail polish or fray check or something, just to keep that little bit secure. But I'm just folding it up so it matches up with that seam line right here, and I'm going to press it, put a clip right there, and keep going. After I have this whole hem stitched back up, then I will come back and very carefully press the creases in my vent closed one more time. So I am stitching this by hand. I'm almost done actually. And so on the right side, it looks really, you know, even. It doesn't have any stitching really visible. There's obviously some small ones, but that's not bad. So I just wanted to show you what I am doing is just basically on the right side of the hem, coming across underneath several stitches because there's a lot of thickness there, and then coming up here on the fabric and just catching a thread or two. Pulling that, coming back down here. That horsehair braid is a little bit tricky to push through, but not that bad. And coming up here and just grabbing a thread or two. Like that. So when, let me stick my paint needle here. When I get down here to this side, I'm thinking that for this particular jacket, and because of the lining, because of the type of fabric and all of those types of things, I'm actually just going to try to very simply stitch this in. But I need to trim all of this stuff down here away. All of this. So if I try to push it really hard so I can get some kind of a crease there when I open it up, I can kind of see that crease, and it's right here. So I am going to trim it down to about 1/8 of an inch of the bottom, just because this is very thick. And that way I can fold it back over like so. Put my clip back here, and when I'm done stitching all the way across, I will come back and very carefully secure it all the way down here and across the bottom so that none of that's going to come open. Okay, so new day, new things taken care of, but you know what, we're going to get to this. So can you see way down here at my hem? You know what, I think I need to lower the camera. Hang on. It's as low as it goes, so I hope you can see. So at this point, my hem of my blue is done, and I'm happy with that. But I need to deal with my lining. So I'm going to do a little different. And I've got my heat erasable pen. And what I'm going to do is just kind of draw a little line where the bottom edge peeks out. Okay, so that when I pull this up, I'll have all these little marks that I can connect. And that's going to give me a guideline that I can start with. So that's my first step all the way around. You know, as I go, I can just turn her and keep making my little marks just like that. Okay, I'll be back in a minute. Hi, Midna. Okay, so I've got it all marked, just kind of flopped it up here on my table. So when I peel back this, you can see my little trail of red marks here. So if that is my bottom, that's what lines up with this bottom edge. And I'm going to want my finished edge of my lining to be like this, about 1/2 an inch higher than this edge, okay? So here is my thought. If this is what lines up with the bottom, 1/2 an inch above that is where I want my actual edge of this to be. Okay, now if I want a hem of about 1 inch, that means I need to actually cut this 1/2 an inch below this mark. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to line up my little ruler here with the little marks I made 1/2 an inch in, and draw myself a second line that is 1/2 an inch below that. Just kind of easing it as I go. So then I will cut it along this line here. All right, so I've got it all trimmed off. So what I need to do now, because this is my white that does fray, is I need to serge the edge. So I got to put my white thread back on my serger, and I'm going to serge the entire bottom of my white edge and then press it, and that will erase all of my marks. And then I will press it up 1 inch, just like we did up here, okay, except, you know, no of the reinforcing horsehair braid down here. It's just going to be as is. I'll deal with the pleat the same way as I did up here, where I slice it and work around it. But because this does fray, I will be coating the edge with my clear nail polish, whereas right here I did not have to with this one. I could just very carefully trim it, okay? So let me go ahead, get all of those things done, so next time you see it, it'll be serged and pressed up. Now I can sew this hem on my sewing machine. I'm just going to run a row of straight stitches across the top of the hem. That's fine. It's the lining. It's no big deal. And that will be a lot easier. So let me get started with that serger thread. And I wanted to show you when I'm sewing this, you know, it is a curved hem. I'm trying to get this whole heavy coat. It's getting heavier. And so when I have it just folded once, this is bigger than this. So it's not going to just lay flat. And sometimes just sewing that straight, you know, a lot of times I have all these techniques for gathering it as I go. But for this, it's a hem. It's not going to be seen. It's going to be on the inside, so I'm not really being too persnickety about it. But I want to show you the way that I just kind of work it in. And it's just with a little awl you know, these are handy little things. It gets a little pointy finger in there. So just kind of as I go, I will just try to work a little bit at a time in and just push it underneath those feed dogs so that when I get up here, that little extra has been worked in, and on the outside it's fine, and I'm not going to have one big fold in the hem. All right, so I kind of have it open here. So now you can see this hem here, my lining hem here. So the simple thing that I need to do now is sew them together. So at this point, unfortunately, I did not think about this at the time, and I stitched this all the way up, and I need this to be open flat so I can run my machine through there. So I'm going to open that up. It's just a couple stitches. I can put it back down again really soon here. So now this little flap on my front opening, I can open that up, and I can just put these together and run it through my sewing machine. I will come back after I am done and restitch this by hand just so it's nice and neat, but for now it's okay. So I can line these two edges up together, get my little clips, and just continue this same seam here at 5/8 all the way down. At this point, I'm not going to look at top stitching or understitching it. I'm just going to continue that one. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. All right, so I'm going to call my hem done. I've decided not to attach it. I'm going to let it be free. That way, when I put it on, if it lining wants to go up a little bit, it's not going to pull this with it. But I can tell you, I did try on this part just a minute ago, and it does work well. It's a shorter length than this. I made mine a little bit shorter, more like high calf level, you know, below knee, high calf. I think that's going to work better for how I move around, the activities I do, and things like that, so I can actually get some use out of this. But it's cute. So I'm actually going to go up here and start working on putting in these sleeves. Okay, so this is one of my sleeves, remember this. And for right now, I'm going to just kind of push that lining layer back down, ignoring it for a while. And this has a single notch here and a double notch here, so I know the back is the double notched, okay? And I need to go back over to my machine, and I'm going to run at about 3/8 of an inch in a longer stitch length gathering stitch type across the top, just to try to cinch it in just a little bit so I can get a nicely shaped sleeve cap on this before I try to set it into my jacket. So I'm going to do that for both of these, just between the two notches. I would say I'm going to start about an inch above each one of the notches and work around that way. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and tug on the bobbin thread of these and see how it goes. Give myself a little bit of gather up here. All right, so once again, it's just my set of bookends with a pressing mitt strapped to the top of it here. And I am going to try to shape my sleeve cap on top of here. So with my gathers slightly tugged, I can mold it to the top here. And what I want is that at about a point about 5/8 inch in, that I want that to be perfectly smooth. So let me turn it this way real quick. And I'm going to get my iron and just kind of hit this, and it's going to relax those threads. Get the fabric used to bending that way, stretching out a bit on the top. And I'm just going to lightly try to shape it with my hand while it is warm and moist here. So it's used to going in that direction before I put it into my jacket. So now I can lift it off. It's going to stay in that little shape. Let's see if I can hold it there like that. and that's going to make it a lot easier to insert it into my jacket once it's already formed like this ahead of time. So I'm going to do the other one real quick. All right, so I've just kind of pulled my lining up so I can work with just this part. This is my back, this is my front. So I'm going to find the sleeve that coordinates with that, which is not this one. Is this one, and I'm going to set it in so the right sides are together, the right side of the sleeve against the right side of the fabric. So let me get under here. We've got lots of fabric going on, and match up my very center top seam and my underarm seam first. Trying to make sure I keep my seam allowances open and match up these bottoms, and then I will match up the notches. Sorry, I'm not too sure how far off camera that went. Okay, so now I can match up the notches. Let me go ahead and do that. I'll match up the notches, try to work this in up here, and I'll show you how it looks. Okay, so I got one sleeve in. I just wanted to work through it off camera, make sure everything is good, and it is. You can kind of see where I worked in all of the ease, and there's not a pucker, it's just ease. And if I go over to press it later, I think that all that's going to smooth out for me. But let's just take it one step at a time. The main thing that I wanted to point out is on sleeves, in the back, there's a point, like there's usually notches right around here. Okay, that's usually right around where the two notches is, where the curve is really coming up. And then up here, they don't actually show that seam, but there's a center seam here. And the dot that they usually have you put gathers in is right here. But there's this whole place right here that you're going to need to actually work in extra ease. And that's where the back stitching really comes in handy. And it's not difficult, and it actually doesn't take a lot of time, and it makes life so much easier, I can't even tell you. So let me go ahead, get this basically just very roughly pinned on. So I'm just going to match my bottoms, my tops. I need to pull this lining up here out of the way so I can get to it. So that's another good reason why not to attach the lining on the bottom of the jacket, or if you're going to, don't do it yet, because there's a lot of stuff to do. After the sleeves, we still have to attach the shoulder pads up here, and then, you know, connect the collar base. So still more to do here, so don't attach your lining yet, even if you're going to. With that, when I'm back stitching, I am looking at the sleeve side. I'm not looking at this side, I'm looking at the sleeve side. But I do want to get a couple things roughly pinned into place. So I match up my top, my bottom, and my notch. I'm actually ignoring the dots right now because I'm going to be putting so much ease into that other back part. I want to kind of averages out in this whole area here. Okay, so this is my back. The back has two notches, and it also doesn't have that princess seam coming in, so that's easy to tell. So I'm just going to kind of just stick a pin about halfway through here just to hold it in place, and one on the other side. So first I need to cut my thread, and I am using a thread that is about 26 inches long, not too long, and I do work with it doubled. And I do that for a few reasons, but mostly because working with a doubled thread that you're pulling pretty hard has a tendency to wear out this part up here. So if you're doing shorter pieces, you know, you're just repeating it, which is good. Plus, if one of these does happen to snap under stress, you don't lose the entire armhole. You know, there's only a certain amount that it's going to pull out. So I don't think that's going to happen though. All right, so I want to open this up so I am looking at it from the inside, all right? And I am going to start this way. I like to start at my very center bottom, and I like to look at it so I can go this way. So I'm basically starting at the center bottom, and I am working up along the front edge towards the top of the shoulder. Now there is not nearly as much ease to work in the front, which is nice, but there's still, you know, a decent amount. So the first thing is I'm kind of just making sure that in general I don't have a whole lot extra pulled up there. And the front is not the issue, it's the back. But I think that that's going to be fine. So because this is a very dark fabric and my marking pen, it's kind of not doing so well on this fabric, I'm using chalk to mark it. And I'm using my little fine chalk roller. So I got my little piece of measuring tape, and I'm just basically marking out, you know, a few inches at a time, because this chalk just brushes off very quickly. So I have this much of a guideline to start with, okay? Because I want to make sure that even though I'm just backstitching by hand, that I am keeping it on the seam allowance. And I want to make sure that my edges are also lined up nicely. Now I'm going to be backstitching pretty standardly. Here is my front notch all the way up around the front. It's when I get to the back that I'm really going to work in all the extra ease. I'm going to start it underneath my little flap. I'm going to start right here. This is, again, looking at it from inside the sleeve. I'm going to make a little bar tack. Now this fabric, it's almost like that microfiber kind of stuff that's kind of hard to sew through. So where I have 4 layers because of all the seam allowances, just going straight up and down seems to be good. Just putting a couple little stitches there just to anchor it in place, making sure that I stay on my little chalk line. This is very thick, so excuse me while I just power my way through this bottom part here. Okay, so now that I am in the regular fabric, I am basically backstitching about 1/16 of an inch, coming forward about the same amount. And this is in the places where I'm not working in a lot of ease. All right, it's going to be a little bit different with that. But because I am looking at the sleeve side, the back part here should be smooth. So you can feel that with your hand as you go and make sure that stays smooth. All right. And this fabric is very hard to push through, but we shall persevere. So I'm actually, now that I'm looking at what I'm doing while I'm talking, I'm coming backwards about 1/16 of an inch, going forwards between 1/16 and 1/8 of an inch. All right. And every now and then, turn it over, check the back, make sure everything is nice and smooth the way you want, and then flip it back. And just keep going. Now, like I said, this is the front, which is pretty, hang on, I got a little knot there, which is gonna set in very well. When I get up here where all my ruffling is, I will turn the camera back on. Alrighty, so I am working myself up to the top of the sleeve. And again, I am on the front. On this side, I started coming up the front. On the other sleeve, I had to start the back just so I could keep stitching in the same direction. You'll see what I mean when you do it. So basically, when I get up to this ruffly sleeve cap part, I'm turning the sleeve inside out so that I can, kind of like I had it on my mitt on the ironing board, holding my sleeve cap in my hand this way. And what that's going to do is help me make sure that along this stitching line that I just marked, that is nice and smooth. So I just had to start a new thread, so good time to start. And I'm just going to continue making my little back stitch, but it's the way that I hold it. And as I'm holding it, I'm still making sure that the back side is nice and smooth, but holding it so that I can really carefully watch my sleeve cap and make sure that nothing is going to pucker in. Now, there's not a lot of easing I need to do in the front. You can see it's sitting very smoothly. So just take your time and work that in, and I will see you back here when I hit the very top shoulder seam. All right, so I've gotten up to the top here and I'm ready to work my way around the back, and that's where all the easing comes in. I was trying to figure out how to show you, and I think this will work. So pretend these are my 2 layers of fabric, that this is my, one of them is, this one here is my sleeve. This one here is my bodice, okay? And this is my needle. So I have a stitch that came up like this, and I am ready to put my needle back down. So my needle's gonna go back down this way, and when it comes up, it's gonna come up at an angle. Whereas before, when I'm not working in ease, my needle comes up more straight, okay? When I'm working in a lot of ease, my needle comes up at an angle. And that's gonna put it coming up in the top layer farther ahead than at the bottom layer. So that then when I straighten it up, it's going to want to slide, let's see if I can do this, slide this top layer back a little bit as I pull it to tighten up that thread. Okay, so I think I got my little seam ripper stuck in here. Not sure how that works. We'll figure that out in a bit. Well, anyhow, I now have a seam ripper that has a weight permanently attached to it, I guess. I'll figure that out. Anyway, okay, so then as I am pulling my needle back to get ready to make the next stitch, it's going to pull that sleeve part back ever so slightly and work in just a little bit so that then I come up at the next stitch. Pull it up, tighten it, and it gently pulls that back a little bit more. So I'm working just a tiny bit into that stitch. And basically you're working like 1 millimeter or so of ease, I don't know what in the world to do here, into each one of those. This is like one of those Chinese puzzles. This is crazy. Anyway, you're working like about 1 millimeter or so into each one of those stitches so that the ease is going to work in, you know, gently over the whole thing and not a couple big abrupt stitches. So with that, here I am doing the same thing. This is the top, this is going towards the back, and I am going to make easing stitches basically from this bottom notch all the way up, okay? So on the first sleeve, I was working this way. On this sleeve, I'm working that way. But this whole thing, I'm working in ease. So I have my little stitching line marked, and I'm gonna come up at an angle, okay? And when I come up at an angle, I'm up a lot further than when I come straight up, you know? And then I pull it back. I'm working in just a tiny bit of ease, trying not to stab myself. And I can go up to my next one. So I come up to my next stitch, and it's the same thing. And when I tighten this stitch, see how when I'm pulling it back, I'm working just a little bit in, not enough to make a ripple, but enough to have a little bit of fullness, okay? So I pull it back and I have some ease built in. Keep doing it, going forward at an angle, pull it back, work in the fullness. Going up along my stitching line at an angle, coming back to work in the fullness. And I think you probably get the idea of it by now, so I'm going up, tugging it backwards to work in some fullness, going back down. Okay, so I'm just going to continue it this way down this back, and it should work in all of that fullness before I even get to this notch. But I'll let you know how it goes. Like right here, I just can go like this and work more of that extra up here. And I'm still holding on to my sleeve cap. When I get below the sleeve cap, you know that you can just hold it regular. But up here, since my stitching line is right about here, that's where I'm holding it. So it looks like it's time to go ahead and mark a little bit more stitching line with my little micro chalk right there. And I'll just keep on going. All right, so I've gotten actually just down this far. Here's all my gathers. Here is my notch right there, and I have all that extra ease worked in. So now from this point back down to the underarm seam, I'm just going to do a very standard back stitch with my needle going down and up, you know, more at right angles, and get down to the bottom and tie it off. Okay, so this is the outside, what it looks like with all of my back stitching on, okay? And this is the inside. And what I'm going to do now is go over to my sewing machine and run another row of stitching just inside of this in the seam allowance, you know, maybe about 1/8 of an inch in, all the way around. It's going to reinforce this, but it's also going to give me a safe zone so that I can come down here and clip up to that row of stitching, knowing that it's not going to want to compromise any of the integrity of my back stitching here. So over to the sewing machine, stitching like right about here, all the way around. Okay, so I have my second row of stitching in there, and I'm just going to come, this is my underarm area, and I'm clipping up to, but not slicing that row of stitching, because that's going to help me have more ease of movement down there. Okay, so I've put my jacket on here inside out, obviously, and I just want to get my sleeve lining somewhat oriented. So the first thing I'm doing is making sure the edge of my cuff is where it needs to be so that it's gonna hang right. Let me see if I can turn her. Because if it's pulling too much, the cuff's gonna wanna go kind of wonky at the edge. So when I get the cuff at the right position, I'm actually going ahead and putting those straight pins all the way through just to hold it, hold the lining to the main fabric at that position so that it won't, so that at least at this point it's correct. Okay, so let me do a couple more pins here. Turn her around. Just going to stick a pen up here on top for a second. So now that this is good and the blue part of my sleeve is sewn on, what I'm going to need to do is basically stitch on the lining. Now, because of the understitching and everything down here at the bottom, I have a little extra room in my upper area here, so instead of a 5/8, I'm probably going to do closer to about 3/4 or maybe a little more. But I'm just going to put a pin in here to line up that center seam with both the jacket and the sleeve. Okay, I just want that to be set there. A lot of this stuff I'm just going to kind of work in as I go because it is lining. It's not that critical that it's exactly perfect. I will be stitching this also by hand, but this, the way that I'm going to do this is just looking at the right side, just kind of whip stitching it lining to lining. Okay, so just whip stitching around here. I have it basically pinned to a position that looks normal to me, you know. Oh, and in the very bottom, you can kind of see here, I opened up the stitches in the very underarm seam here of the lining, probably about 5/8 or maybe a little bit more, just so that can be spreading out. So that's it. Let me go ahead and flop it back down on the table get my white thread and just kind of whip stitch these linings on. Okay, so I have been just whip stitching down here. I'm basically folding in my seam allowance, placing it on top and stitching it. But as I got closer to the underarm seam, I decided, yes, I do need to go ahead and make some clips here just so that it will sit well and be comfortable. So I just wanted to let you know, yes, I am doing that on both sides. This is my center underarm seam of these things, just so I can fold it in well that way. But I'm going to continue to just whip stitch it down like this all the way around. All right, I am dealing with shoulder pads now, and these are men's shoulder pads, so they do have the little notch. So I'm just going to mark that so you can see it a little bit better. That notch indicates where the shoulder seam is. And these pads look like they want to curve this way. So I'm going to let them. I would think it would be the other way, but it looks like they want to curve this way. So with that in mind, I want to have the mark for my shoulder mark on the outside. I'll be able to see it better. So I'm lining these up, you know, centering them on my little hash mark. I'm going to draw a line from this mark over here to this one, and that should make two fairly symmetrical ones. Now, yes, the line is not going straight down the middle. The shorter side goes in the front. See, here's the little notch there. The shoulder side, if I fold it this way, is in the front, and this is the back. And this lines up with the seam allowance. So I've got my jacket turned inside out here. This should be just about the last thing we do with it inside out, hopefully. And this is the back. This is the front of one of my sleeves. Here is the edge of my seam allowance. So if I fold this in half, oops, wrong one. Okay, take this one. I'm going to fold this in half at that mark, okay, and place that mark right here on top of my shoulder seam with this edge up against this edge, like that, okay. I'm just going to put a little clip here to hold it in place, and there is so much stuff going on here. I was honestly very tempted to skip the shoulder pads altogether. But you know me, I love shoulder pads, I really do. But when I briefly tried this on just to make sure it was going okay, and I could tell without shoulder pads, it was going to be a weak shoulder, and all of the ease and everything was going to really show, almost like a gather, and I didn't want that after everything else I'd done. So here we are. So anyhow, what I'm going to do first, usually I would fold this in half and stitch down here and then tack the edges, but honestly there is so much going on in here, I just don't even want to mess with that. So instead what I'm going to do is tack it here and at each end and in the middle. I'm just going to tack it in those three places, you know, with my thread, needle and thread. Hopefully it won't be visible from the outside, and just call that good, not going through the whole stitching down the shoulder seam. I think because it is fully lined, this pad itself won't be tugged. It's the lining that's going to smooth over it. So I'm thinking that's going to be okay. But I'm going to start in the middle here and then do this one. And then once those are done and I can make sure that these are coming to the right place, then I'll do these. Okay? But always way out here in the seam allowance. All right, that is done. And the last thing I really want to work on with this jacket is to secure this collar, because right now it is completely open. So if the lining comes out, it just kind of flattens out. And I've been trying to think of the best way to do this, because there's so many layers, I really don't want to hand stitch this, is I am going to come here in these side seams. This is the shoulder seam that kind of comes up into that big collar. I'm going to do a stitch in the ditch just in this upper collar part on both this side and this side. After I do that, I'll mess with it for a bit, but I am hoping that that's going to be enough to want to keep this folded the way that it should be. So when I stitch it, I will be looking at it from the right side here, and you just kind of very, very carefully with as closely matching thread as you can, guide it straight down this seam so it's hidden in there. But I have so many layers and it's so thick that I really need to do it by machine just to keep that secure. So, well, this part of the jacket is basically done. Doesn't look like it's hanging quite right, but that's just the drape on the dress form here. It's cute. It's cute. It's adorable with a little dress or a little skirt or something. I'm glad I put the shoulder pads on it because that did help square the shoulders. I think the stitch in the ditch thing is enough to keep this collar organized the way it should be. So that is good. But at this point, I need to get started on those detachable fur collar and cuffs, and I'm actually thinking I am going to take a little break on this just for, oh, I don't know, a couple hours at least. Get a cup of tea or something and regroup before I do that, and because I have no idea how that's going to go, but I just wanted to show you that so far it's a cute little coat. All right, I'm going to do the cuff first because it looks like the easier of the two. And I want to try to figure out how this fur is going to deal with life. The first thing I would suggest, if you're going to do this, keep a vacuum handy with the little brush on it because, yeah, this stuff is just shedding everywhere. And I can tell as soon as I put this onto my coat, I'm going to have to vacuum my whole coat too because it's just wanting to shed everywhere. So now the way that the instructions want you to do this is to sew one cuff and then the other one and then stack them together and sew the bottom seam. So my first thing I'm going to do is this side seam on both the cuff and the lining. Now since this lining is going to be 100% enclosed, I'm not going to serge around it. You know, I think it's the only white piece I did not serge around, but just with a regular white thread on a straight stitch machine, sewing it at 5/8 right there and right here. And there are two cuffs, so I'm going to be doing two linings and two fur pieces. All right, so I've got my various pieces here, and I need to put them right sides together. So I am just going to put my lining on the inside. So I'm folding my lining right side out, leaving this inside out. I'm going to stack them together, stacking it together, matching up this side seam here. I'm not sewing the top, I am just sewing this bottom edge. And thankfully, the faux fur, you know, it's on a stretchy knit kind of base, so it's a little bit forgiving, so that's nice. So I'm just matching up the edges, and I am going to come back and sew this around the edge here at a 5/8 inch seam allowance for both of the cuffs. So I have sewn it, and along the seam line, most of the fur sewed on really well, but on some of it, it kind of got turned under. So I am just coming back with my little awl and flicking those hairs out from that seam. So it's going to be nice and fluffy, and I think we just have a little bit more to go, but just wanted to show you that that's just how I'm picking it out, just so that it looks lovely. Now, this is going to be on the inside. So say if my hand is here, the fur is next to my hand, but I kind of want a roll of it to be visible and then the white. So when it's hanging down, what I want to see is my blue jacket some white, and then a row of fur underneath there. This is probably going to hang out at probably about 1 inch or so from the bottom of my sleeve. I think that's going to be pretty cool. So because of that, because I want a roll of this to be seen, you can see up here that changes how it's meeting up here, okay? But I'm going to actually use that to my advantage because I do need to put on, oops, excuse me, I'm cooking, pause, cancel, dismiss, okay. I am cooking something, I have my timer on it, okay. But I'm going to be using snap tape to connect these to my jacket, at least that's my thought right now. So what I'm going to do is just to keep this where it looks right to me from the visible side. I'm just going to put a few pins to hold it in place. So actually I have changed my mind on the way I'm going to do this. What I am going to do is just trim this so it is even up here all the way around, or fairly even, doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm going to use a very wide bias tape to just enclose that whole top. And I've got some blue, very wide tape here. Looks like I need to iron it for a moment, but I'm just going to kind of encase that whole little top like this. And that'll give me something that's going to look nice. It'll also give me a nice place to sew my snap tape to when I'm done. Okay, so I have a piece. It's very wide hem tape that I just folded in half and pressed. Okay, so it's got a little crease. And I am just going to put this on here, pin it on, and I'm going to hand stitch it just to make sure that I catch it nicely and I don't mess up my fur. Just pin it on here, get it set all the way around. So I was just looking at the instructions, and their version of detachable is meaning you can pull some stitches out and it will come off, but it is not meant to be easily removable, okay? So why not? Let's just go with that, which means instead of making these, you know, snap in, snap out, we're just going to slip stitch them on. So this is what it looks like right now. I got my little bias tape on there. I've got it so that there's a nice little edge of fur showing, and I'm going to place it so that this seam down here is where the bottom seam is, and I want it to peek out, so I have about 1 inch of the white showing, just, you know, for dramatic effect, and then the fur, kind of like that. I guess what I'm saying is I want enough of the white to show that it looks like it's intentional, but not so much that it's hanging out much too far. So actually that looks a little bit better. I think that fits the cuff a little bit better. So then on the inside it's going to be, ooh, isn't that lovely? All right, I like that. We're going to go with this. So the white peeks out maybe 1/4 inch, and the rest of it is all fur. So what I'm going to do is just place some pins around here, holding it at the right position, and then I can turn my sleeves inside out and whip stitch it. Now can you see all the little hairs and everything? That is from this fur that is shedding. Once I'm done with all of this, I'll put my coat on my dress form and just vacuum the whole thing to get all of that off. But for right now, we're just gonna live with it. So now that I have that pinned, I'm gonna reach in here, carefully pull my sleeve out. Try not to poke myself too much here. And I'm just going to very carefully slip stitch the edge of this bias tape to the edge of my cuff. And it looks like it's actually lining up pretty well with just the edge of my facing here. So I'm just gonna even that out a little bit. So that's pretty good. That gives me a good guideline. So I'm gonna pin the other one in, go back with my needle and thread again, and just whip stitch this on all the way around for both of the sleeves. Okay, with the cuffs done, it is time to get started on this collar piece here. And looks like I'm gonna have to make a dart in fur. So that's gonna be fun. First thing I need to do is go ahead and punch out the little circles for my size, which is 16. And then I'm gonna transfer these markings over to both the lining and the very back of my fur pieces right here. So that's step one. All right, so lots of circles to punch out for this little dart because it is one of those oval darts. So we have a few, and then I also punched out the very tip up here so I would be able to see all the way down and then all the way back up again. So that's how I'm going to be transferring it over, and then like always I will go ahead and connect these dots with a line just so I have something to use as a guideline as I'm sewing. So I'll be doing this on all 4 pieces. And just like all other darts, I'm going to pin up this fur one, put a pin straight down one dot and up the other of all 3 of these center ones. Push it together, making sure I put a nice pin down here at one point and down here at the other point. And when these are going straight through, because this is so thick, I don't just want to tuck it in because it'll get out of alignment. So I'll pull it out and then put it back in at an angle. So here, this one straight through, pull it out, put it back in at an angle, and the same with this one. And I am just going to sew all 4 of these just like regular, just like that. I'll be using my sewing machine with the white thread, my cute little bell machine, and we'll see how this looks. Now, when I sew this, if it's all tucked in like that, again, I'll just come in with my little awl or a pin or something and just flick those hairs out, but it should be okay. Okay, so this is my front piece. The white ones are just the same. They have the dart sewn into them. And there is a back collar piece, the 16, that's cut on a fold, and I have one of those in my fur and one in the lining. And I'm going to go ahead and sew these on. The bottom part here does not get sewn on. It basically matches up to where this dart ends. That is where the bottom is. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and pin this on both sides of the white and the fur and sew down here at 5/8 of an inch. I think you can see a little better on the lining than on the fur what I was talking about. So it starts up here, comes down to basically about 5/8 inch in, and that's where you stop sewing. So on this side, this is separate, and this side, this is separate. Okay? So I'm going to be putting these both right sides together and pin them together so that we can sew them together. If I can get these straightened out. So just matching up my seams. There are some notches, but I did not cut them. But matching up this bottom edge down here. I'm going to go ahead and pin it all the way around. In order to pin this part correctly, I need to come back in here and clip this seam allowance up to that point where the dart is on both sides. So it's right here and over here up to that point right there. And I'll do that over here also. Okay, just about got it all pinned here. And so with this one, no bias tape. This one's going to be a little different. Kind of like sewing the entire thing around it, but leaving this little bottom of the neck piece open so we can flip the whole thing right side out. So this part here, I'm going to sew across from this point where the dart is, across there, and then down, everything at a 5/8 allowance, from here down, over, all the way around, coming back up and ending right here. Okay, so I'm just going to come back in here and trim some bulk from all of these corners, that side, and where all of this is, I'm going to actually, I think I'm going to pink this whole curved edge here to try to make it so it's going to turn nicely. So I'm just going to clip it about 1/4 inch away from my stitching through both layers. I know that's going to make a mess, but I will vacuum my table in just a bit. And I think that that'll make it easy enough for me to go ahead and turn this to the right side. All right, so I have this flipped right side out, and I very lightly, I wouldn't want to say I ironed it. I like kind of lightly put my iron on top of it, hit it with some steam, and then came back with my hand and tried to press it a little bit just to get it so it'll lay nicely. But I'm coming back, you know, and picking out all of these little fuzzies that got caught in the seams so that it'll have a much more brushier edge on it. So let me finish up this, and then we're going to do a little bit of hand sewing to close up that back collar piece. Okay, so now I just need to close up this little back area. So I'm just going to fold it in and fold it in and pin it together like so, and then I'll come back and just whip stitch it closed from this side. It comes to a bit of a point here, and you know what? To get it to lay nicely, I'm going to put a couple little clips in here. Excuse me. Like that. So I can fold that to a point, this to a point, and just pin it together. So, all right, so my collar is done. Now I just need to get it placed in here. And again, hopefully it's going to poke out just a little bit. And I'm thinking the idea is that when the bottoms line up here, the top extends. I actually just want it to be kind of like the cuffs, where just a little line of fur is visible on the outside. So what I'm going to do is just kind of pin it in place where I think it looks good, and while it's flat on the table, and then put it on the dress form, make sure it's actually what I want, and then I will start stitching it. So if I was doing the dress and, you know, following the pattern directions and everything, I would have functioning buttonholes. And there would be buttonholes put in here also. But I do not, I am not. So this is just kind of overlapping where these hooks are, okay? But since I'm attaching it here, I'm thinking if I leave this loose, I'll still be able to use the hooks. I'll verify that when I put it up on my dress form just to make sure. But like I said, I'm just gonna put several pins throughout on here to make sure that it's going to be nice. I think it's going to be very dramatic. I'm looking forward to this. I just have the collar pinned on, but I love it. I think that that is the drama that I was waiting for. So it's beautiful. It really is. Take a look at that. How cool is that? So I'm going to go ahead, put the whole coat back down flat on the table. All right, so it's back on the table here. So I'm just going to get a needle and thread and come around and just stitch it hand stitch it, whip stitch it, whatever, because it's meant to be so that you can remove it if you need to. Whatever that means. I'll probably leave it on. But I'm going to whip stitch it down all the way around the edge, all the way down here. This part here, I will come down and just come over just a couple. You know, I'm not going to go all the way because, like I said, the side with the hooks, I need that to be loose. And all this up here, I am hoping that it will want to stay. If it looks like that's going to separate and everything, well, we'll deal with that. So here it is. I love it. Do you love it? You saw everything involved in putting it together. And I think it's a beautiful coat. Now, here's one thing. I can move my arms really well, and I love that. And I think it's made to wear with lovely long gloves. And I do actually have a pair inside. I forgot to get them. But one caveat, if you're going to do this, and it's fun, you know, size it up, because it was made for a dress and not for a coat. You don't have a whole lot of extra ease, okay? It fits like a dress. So right now I have like a pencil skirt and like a silk cami kind of thing underneath it. So, you know, everything fits really well. But if I was wearing a really bulky winter outfit, there's no way that this was going to come together and not look like it was really straining, you know? But I like the length. The pattern was 6 inches longer. I did shorten it just because this works better with me, as far as, you know, not getting dirty and being too dramatic and everything. And I like it. Lots of changes from the construction of the original pattern, you know, using the same pieces, obviously, but doing it totally differently. But I can't see wearing something this wow as a dress. But then, you know, it is a very pretty, going to the ice skating pond, you know, a very Courier and Ives kind of thing. I don't do that. But anyway, I love it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. And a lot of times when I'm doing a project like this, the technique that I'm using, you can just carry over that same technique to a different project. It doesn't mean you have to do the same one. So like if you have an open front dress, you know, like one of those fitted button-up dresses or something, and you wanted to turn it into a lined coat, a lot of the ways that I did this, you could do the same thing for one of those patterns, even if it was made for a dress. Just my only caveat is size it up if you're going to wear winter things underneath it. So anyhow, that's it. Hope you liked it. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Living my bucolic life, throughout the city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.